Legends once told of a podcast, lost now in the sea of time. These ancient recordings spoke of games and the arcane art of HTML5. Today, Jeff Blair and Matt Hackett bring these words back to life. It is Lostcast, and may your ears receive it.
Welcome to Lostcast episode 67. I'm Matt Hackett.
And I'm Jeff Blair.
So we just got, well, I guess you didn't go anywhere. I went somewhere. You were just kind of at home in the Bay Area, but I'm in LA now, so I just got back from the Bay Area a couple days ago.
I took the BART across the bay.
That sounds like a song, doesn't it? I took the BART across the bay. Maybe not.
It does.
It sounds like a ye old, like 1940s song or something.
It's like a 49ers,
Something like that.
Not the sports team, but, the actual
right.
namesake.
So, Game Developers Conference, GDC, that's why we were there. We participated. Intel invited us to their cross-platform, what was it called? The Future of Cross-Platform Game Development Roundtable. And that was a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed it.
It was a lot of fun, yeah. We were lucky enough to meet with the gentlemen of Yogscast while we were there. So hopefully that will blossom into a wonderful relationship down the road. If you're not familiar, they are a YouTube network that come out of the UK, and they just have an amazingly large audience. Like, all of the UK loves Yogscast. If you're not familiar, go check it out. It's lots of entertaining content.
And some people outside the UK even.
Some. I'm not aware of any. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, they've got a giant network. So what did we do? What else was going on? As always, there's lots of GDC parties. I think I went to like 2 or something.
I did not go to any parties.
No, you're not a party goer.
I'm not a party person.
That's not a thing that Blair does.
I'm pretty lame.
I didn't say it. You said it. That makes it okay.
When it hit like 5 o'clock, I was like, I'm Barton home.
5 o'clock? It's almost my bedtime.
I gotta take my pills.
So, let's see. I don't remember what we did Tuesday. We had something going on, like basically the first half of the week, like every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I guess it was dinner with Intel, and something during the day, probably a meeting or something.
We podcasted with Greg.
Yes, that was
Lostcast 66.
Yes. Love and Marketing. That was that one, the last week's. Always fun to do an in-person cast.
Should have been like Code, Sleep, Love or something.
You want to name the podcast now?
No.
That's what I thought.
All right.
We podcasted with Greg, and Wednesday was the roundtable. And it was hosted by Chris Perillo, who used to be, my understanding, is a host of a tech TV show. And then we also had, let's see, I actually made some notes here. There were 4 of us total. I remember it being the Chris show.
It was.
It was like
Chris, Matt, and Jeff.
That's it exactly. It was Chris Price of iConsole TV, and it was Chris Skaggs of Soma Games and Code Monkeys. And it was pretty interesting to see the different perspectives, actually. Like, obviously, you and I were on the same page with HTML5 and stuff, but Chris Skaggs is a Unity person, and he doesn't have any interest in HTML5. And Chris Price is like one of these ARM developers.
No, he's not an ARM developer.
I thought he was okay. Chris Price does something I don't really understand, so I'll let Jeff describe it.
He is working on a console called iConsole.tv, and it's actually an Intel-based Android install. So most Android installs run on ARM. So you're kind of in the right ballpark.
Yay, I like being in the right ballpark.
But ARM chips, at least, I'm probably not going to, I don't really know exactly what I'm talking about here, but from my understanding, ARM chips run mostly on mobile devices because they're more battery friendly and stuff. But my guess is that they sometimes lack the powerfulness of, say, a desktop Intel CPU or something. So anyways, from what I gather, iConsole they're kind of like an Ouya, but with like Xbox hardware maybe.
Interesting.
So it's like a custom install of Android running on top of an Intel-based box.
Right, yeah.
And so they're getting like great performance. And he actually did a couple of talks prior to the panel. Anyways, that was a pretty interesting perspective because he wasn't... he worked with game developers, but it didn't sound like he was a game developer.
Right,
He was mostly coming at it from like the platform architecture side, which was pretty interesting. And then the other guy was also very interesting, Chris Skaggs. I wouldn't say that he didn't have any interest in HTML5. I think that he had interest in HTML5 as one, a rendering target for plugin-less web play.
Sure.
And two, as kind of that hybrid app concept where overgrowth being a good example. Like crisp, fast native 3D graphics, and then reusable DOM-based UI to make your life easier.
Right.
If there's one thing the web is good at, it's UI.
User interface. Yeah, it's pretty much what it was geared towards from the very beginning. It was like, first I'm just going to display some text with some hyperlinks, and then from there it wanted UI, and then from there it became this like monolithic machine that does everything, but some things very badly.
And there's these idiots that try to make it play games, and it's like, what are you doing? Just
so
write it
dumb.
and see. God,
I hate
damn.
those people. This must have been maybe this was Tuesday. I forget what day, but so we were wandering the expo floor, and we saw that they had a game show you could play.
Oh yeah.
What was that called? It was like You Got Game, I think.
You've Got Game, yeah.
And
or You've Got Game Show was the name of it.
You've Got Game Show, yeah. And it was like a big area with like, chairs set up, people could watch, and there was like 3 podiums that the contestants stood behind, and it was decorated, and like there was an actual like professional host.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal. It was like, it had really good placement too. Like right as you came down those stairs into that Moscone North, I guess.
Yeah.
It was just like, bam, right there in your face.
Yeah. So we were watching some people play that. It looked like a lot of fun, and we just happened to be there at a good time, and then they were looking for more contestants for one more game, and we're like, yeah, let's do it. So it was me, you, and Greg competed. I thought I'd do well, but I did the worst. I think what it came down to was, I remember he asked me first what category. You could pick 19 categories, and there's all these categories, and I had 2 in my mind. I was like, I think I could do pretty well at indies because I follow in the indie industry pretty closely. And then the other was nostalgia. And I don't know. I don't know why. I picked nostalgia, and it was like really hard questions. I got like, it was how many questions can you answer in 60 seconds, basically. And for each question you get right, you get a point. And I only got 2 in a minute. Those questions were hard.
They were really hard, yeah. I was the same way. I went second, and so I had the same categories in my mind. I was like, okay, I'm going to pick either nostalgia or indies, whatever Matt doesn't pick, because I knew you were going to pick one of those.
That's so funny, man.
So you picked nostalgia, and it turned out to be really, really hard.
It was a mistake. That was a fatal flaw in my plan, and
yes.
Indies was the winning category. You did really well there. You got 9.
I did. I did really well. That's better than a lot of people do.
I remember the very first question was like, this documentary movie starring the team Team Meat and Jonathan Blow, and I'm like, so easy. Damn it.
Yeah, I mean, anything is easy when you know the answers, but
exactly.
It just so happened that they asked questions that I knew,
Right, yeah.
Because I was, like I told you before, I was watching some previous contestants, and I saw someone pick the indies category, and I knew about 0 of the indie questions, because they were talking about games that I just haven't played, they asked questions about like Papers, Please, and Thomas Was Alone, and Stanley Parable, and some other things that I was like, I've heard of, but I just haven't played, so I don't really know anything about them.
Yeah.
But I got really lucky in that the selection of questions I got asked when I was a contestant were just, it was like Mutagenics, Indie Game the Movie, like all these things that I just happened to be aware of.
Yeah, you and I both, yeah. I was like, as you were going, I was like, man, I know, I do basically all the same ones you did.
Was there any that I didn't know that you knew?
I don't think so, no. I think you and I have very similar indie knowledge.
Damn it. That means we're very not complimentary.
I feel like we are in general, though. Like, we talk about this sometimes. Like, we both like medieval fantasy and strategy and tactics, blah, blah, blah. But we don't play the same games for whatever reason.
That's true.
Like, you know, we talked about, like, our first... Like, we both love first-person dungeon crawlers, but we have completely different playing histories, which I think is very fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
It's, like, really a small amount of overlap in the games that we play.
Yeah. Oh, so back to the game show. So then I think Greg went, and I think he got 0.
Well, what did he pick?
He picked something like
it was
based on the game or something. It was like movies based on video games.
Man, that was ridiculous. I knew nothing. It was all about questions of movies that were based on video games.
It wasn't easy. Like, you'd think it'd be like, oh, you know, like Super Mario Brothers, Mortal Kombat, Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, but like, no. Like, these were ridiculous questions. Like, you know, what was the name of the actor that appeared alongside this other actor in like some obscure video game reference? And you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, like, it was like the questions about the specific things were just way too much to handle, because it was like, yeah, I know about the Mario Brothers movie. I've seen it like twice. I could answer a lot of like infrastructure questions about it. Like, I might be able to guess the year it came out. I could name the stars. I might even be able to name like the director or something like that. But then they're like, you know, they ask you like specific questions about the plot or something.
Right.
Yeah, I was just really surprised. And the host actually said that when Greg picked that category. Just so you know, this category is extremely difficult. You will.
He's like, great.
Right. Yeah, I was like, too late to change your mind, but.
That was pretty fun.
Man, I could have played that game all day. That was a lot of fun.
So the next day, that was Wednesday. On Thursday, I met up with Greg. You were out and about somewhere.
Yeah, actually, my mom was in town, and like my brother, he works at EA, which is in Redwood Shores. So I'd spent as much time as I could once we were done with our GDC obligations, hanging out with my family, because I don't really get to see them as much these days.
Yeah. So we went back on Thursday, and Greg and I participated again. And Greg kicked my butt. He did really well. He had this strategy. He picked the Metacritical category. So that category was the host would say a game, and you had to guess within 5 points the Metacritic score of that game. And that's an interesting category because, one, you can blow through the questions, right? Like he
really
says,
fast.
You know, game name 85, game name 72, game name 25, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so in 60 seconds you can get through a lot of questions. Secondly, you always have some kind of answer, you know?
Well, it's like if you looked at it as a multiple choice question, so a Metacritic score is out of 100, and you have to be within 5 to get the answer right. So basically, it's a multiple choice question with 20 answers, if you look at it that way. And, you know, you can make an educated guess.
Right.
When we play, or before we played, actually, the team we were watching, someone picked that one and actually got a decent score because, like you were saying, like just a random shot in the dark is going to be better. Like a chance of 1 out of 20 is better than a chance out of 1 out of, you know, infinity if you don't know like some obscure producer's name or something, you know?
Right, yeah. Well, not only that, it's like your search space is narrowed because not very many games have below a 50 on Metacritic, probably.
That's true, yeah. Like, nothing's going to be below 50. There's going to be very few 100s. Like, you're almost never going to guess 95, right?
Right, yeah, so there's like a lot of 70s and 80s.
So it's like, it's a multiple choice question with 1 out of 20, but there's only really, say, about 10, 5 or 10. Yeah, that's a good tactic.
He smoked me that round. So, and then I picked this category called Gen 7 Heaven, which was what I thought it was going to be about Generation 7 games.
Is that a company?
No, 7th generation consoles.
Oh.
So like 360, PS3, and Wii.
Gotcha.
But it was actually about the hardware. Okay. So it was like, which of these 3 consoles like first shipped with a USB port? I was like, PS3, I don't know.
But at least he gave you 3 choices?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it wasn't always just the 3 choices for every question, but yeah, I didn't really do very well. So
we drove back, and Andrea was looking up video game facts and posing them to me as questions, and I did fairly well there. One of them I was happy I got was this console was originally developed as a CD-ROM accessory for Super Nintendo. You know that one?
This console was originally developed as a CD-ROM accessories for Super Nintendo.
And I might have some of the details wrong, and if I do, just tweet at me and call me stupid or something. But this is I forget what the specifics were, but I remember. I mean, think about the era. Like, it's like what came right after Super Nintendo.
TurboGrafx.
It was PlayStation. I remember hearing about some deal where like
that came out right after Super Nintendo.
Well, I mean, like when you look at say. Chronologically, you know, like PlayStation was kind of like better than Sega CD. It was like and Sega, like it goes Super Nintendo, and then like Sega CD is like a little better in some regards, like digital audio and full motion video. I kind of thought
that like Nintendo 64 came out before PlayStation, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think they were around the same time. Man, I get some of those things off by years sometimes.
Yeah, dude, totally.
I'll be like, wasn't that 2006? And it's like, Matt, no, that was 1999. 7 years difference. What's wrong with you? But yeah, I remember that one because I'm pretty sure Sony was actually the one that developed the sound chip in Super Nintendo. But I'm going to stop talking before I completely just everything coming out of my mouth is wrong, and someone's going to be like, I got to make all this huge forum thread now to say how wrong Matt was. I'm sure that'll happen anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, tell me more about your guys' game, because I missed out. There was a third member, right?
Oh, I don't think he did very well.
What do you remember? What
I think
category
he and I
that person
tied.
picked?
So like the third guy and I both got 2, and then Greg got he got a bunch, and then he also got the last question.
Oh yeah, so the way the game works is basically each of the 3 contestants they get to pick a category, and they get 60 seconds to answer as many as they can. And then the way the last one works is there's one more question worth 5 points, and you have to buzz in. The first person to buzz in and answer correctly gets 5 points, right?
Right.
And that's actually how. So when we played, I got 2 in my round, you got 9, and then Greg got 0. So at that point, you already won, but he gave us the last question anyway, and then Greg got it, and that's how we got second place, because he got 5 points for that. I forget what it was.
You went home as a big loser.
Well, that's nothing new. What was that last question?
It's basically the category was called blurb, and he reads you the description of a retailer's video game display or something. Yeah,
I remember the team before us. The answer was Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah. Oh, it was Shadow of the Colossus again. That's the one Greg got.
It was again?
It was Shadow of the Colossus again.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think. I don't remember.
That doesn't sound right to me. we should ask Greg. Anyway.
Hey, I was there, man.
I was there.
I mean, it doesn't sound right to you. You weren't there? No. When Greg and I played.
Oh. I thought you yeah. Gotcha. I was saying when the 3 of us played.
Oh yeah, no.
Whatever question Greg snagged and took second place for me, I don't remember what that was.
I don't remember either.
It'll come to me later. But
it was a game I did not know, so.
That's funny. There must not be that many blurbs then if the same one came up 2 days in a row. Yeah. Anyway, a lot of fun. I hope they continue to develop it. I'd obviously love to see it at GDC again next year, but man, they could put that on YouTube. I'd watch it,
Oh, hell yeah.
Test your knowledge.
This company called I Am 8-Bit.
Yep. That
was pretty cool, yeah. I'll have to dig up. There's some pictures on their Facebook feed of us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Let's see. Let me make a note. I'll put a link in the show notes if I can find it. I don't always do that, FYI. You've probably seen that before. Hey, he said he was going to put that in show notes, but he didn't. But this one I will.
Yeah. I always go to the posting and I see about half of the show notes that we talked about.
Whoops. You can file a complaint.
I will. I'm going to file with HR.
So how did you think the future of cross-platform game development? How did you think that roundtable went?
Oh, I think they went great. It was really interesting. There's some different perspectives, and overall it was pretty well done. I think that the thing that kind of sucked was that The live stream audio was apparently terrible.
Oh yeah. It was a little
I thought
weird.
it was pretty cool to watch it in real time because there was supposed to be like audience participation, like they were gonna like tweet questions and the moderator could then relay them to us and kind of have some real time feedback, which I thought was a really cool idea. But if you can't hear the audio, like how are you gonna?
Yeah,
know what
we
to
had
ask?
we were mic'd. We had those like a little clip-on dealie with a little like pager belt type thing, but we also were passing around a microphone, so it was like it was aggressively bad in that regard because I remember the first time I got the mic that was just like
such
with,
feedback,
that feedback craziness, and I'm like, well, I don't know what to do,
You can really hear that on the edited version too. That
and then
first question.
oh, that's unfortunate. And then I remember Chris, iConsole Chris, iChris. He wasn't mic'd even.
No, he wasn't, and so he sounds like different than everybody else on the edited version as well.
That's weird. So that could have been a little better, but I think that's really all we had to complain about. Sorry to complain.
Like technically speaking, that was about the worst of it.
Yeah, the rest was all smooth as silk. I actually had a moment where my brain just stopped working. This is embarrassing. I was like, I was in the middle of a thought, and like, we've had some, 67 episodes of this podcast here. We've had some practice trying to have a conversation and, speak your mind. And I was doing that, but it's just like one too many things to juggle, and like I'm trying to make eye contact with everybody, and I'm trying to enunciate when I speak and use my hands because there's also video and finish this thought, but like
wildly.
yeah, I just like my brain was like blah 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 blah, and then I get to the end of my sentence, and I'm like, I have no idea what I was going to say next. Like, there's nothing there, so I just like shoved the microphone in your face.
Yeah,
because I just kind of panicked. That was a little embarrassing.
Melissa and I were watching that last night. We were cracking up because
Did you see that?
So
scene
like after you shoved the microphone over to me, I started talking about something, and then like halfway through my sentences, you were like trying to grab the mic back. You're like,
that's
you're like, oh, I remembered. Give it to me. And I'm like, dude, I'm in the middle of a thought.
Yeah. I was trying to. Yeah, I think we would have. I think we could have benefited from all having mics.
Oh, I agree. I think the mic passing was like, it's like an extra thing, like you're saying. It's like an extra thing to juggle that you don't want to. It's kind of like when we podcast with Greg, it like kind of interrupts the flow of the conversation if you have to like signal to somebody that you want the mic, and then like
it does.
You have to keep remembering what you want to say.
That's not how people talk in real life, and you really want to get with anything that needs to feel like a conversation, and that would be maybe a podcast, maybe a some type of cross-platform game developer roundtable. Like, you want it to feel like a natural conversation, and it's like maybe if you've got this really obnoxious person who's like, "Excuse me, I am speaking. It is not your turn to speak." Like I've seen that kind of behavior before, and like you maybe even do that once in a while if like you're finishing a thought or something. You're like, no, let me finish this, blah blah blah. But overall, there's lots of like. You interrupt people, and like what I like to do is I'll like, I don't know if this is good or bad, but I tend to like say supporting things while someone else is talking a lot. I'll give like as they're saying things, I'll say an example like just to let them know that I'm with them and I understand and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's just how communication works. It's not as simple as like I'm speaking now you are speaking. That's a little grating.
Yeah. There's a lot of overlap. And like you said, there's those little kind of interjections, like on the podcast you talk about all the time, like how you say yep,
yeah,
oh yeah, that's a good point.
So this is already in the show notes because I've already been editing the show notes, so it will definitely be there. There's a YouTube video of a pretty good quality of the roundtable. Basically, it's on YouTube, and go watch it if you care. And here I go losing my train of thought again. Where was I going with that?
Yeah. It was interesting because my kind of feeling on the future of cross-platform game development is that HTML5 will be a thing, Unity will be a thing, people writing C++ and porting it, cross-compiling it for different architectures will be a thing. Like, there's lots of tools available, and there's kind of always going to be a few kind of preferred methods.
Right.
But I don't think that, it's nothing like HTML5 is going to be the way that people develop games for cross-platform in the future, or Unity is going to be the way where people develop games.
Right.
You and I were kind of talking about this before, or maybe we were talking about this at the dinner beforehand. Not that I don't think it's an interesting subject to discuss, but as you and I talk about all the time on the podcast, the technical issues kind of have been eclipsed by bigger problems with game development, right? Like, the tech that you use isn't always the biggest issue, and oftentimes, your path to success isn't through cross-platform; it's through having a strong hit on a single platform and then post-success porting it all over the place.
Right, yeah.
Not that there isn't value in launching cross-platform, but I think that another really good point that was made by, I think it was Chris Skaggs, he was talking about, the form factor. And I kind of agree and I kind of disagree that, it's a good goal to say like, oh, I want my game to work well across these different form factors, tablet, desktop, whatever. But at that point, you're increasing the amount of work that you have to do in order to get that game shipped. And sometimes Unity or whatever you're using HTML5 like makes it easier to actually push the code to that platform. But you still have these like big design things that you have to figure out in order to make your game work well on tablet versus desktop.
It could be argued too that if you haven't had a success, like a meaningful success on one platform, then maybe you shouldn't focus on that product to bring it to other platforms. I mean,
that's completely valid, yeah.
That's obviously not always going to be the case, because it could be like, you make say for example, you make a desktop game and it doesn't really find its audience, right? So then you port it to iPad and maybe there it does. Like, that could totally happen. But I think in a lot of cases, it's like you'll see a game be released on one platform, say desktop, maybe just PC even. It's like only Windows, right? Right. And then you'll see like, oh, it becomes like kind of a hit game, like this company that made it's been able to spin that into a success, right? And then they start to branch out, like, okay, now the Mac version is available, and like it lets you be noisy about that, maybe you get better coverage, and maybe you got coverage in Macworld or something like that. And then likewise with Linux, like now we're on Linux, more noisy, and you kind of take these baby steps to put your content out there. Especially
when you're like us. I mean, that's the thing about the Roundtable that I think is interesting, is that, you and I have a very specific perspective on some of these things, in a different world, some people might be like, they don't care about Node WebKit and they want to be on the web and they want to be on desktop and they want to be on mobile, like from day one. It kind of depends on your business case. But us being indie and having a small surface area to support is better for us, because we want to try and like gain a foothold somewhere. Yeah. And right now for us, that's desktop, and maybe someday we'll bring more games to mobile, and maybe we won't. We'll see. But I'm definitely not in the camp that thinks that our primary focus should be as many devices as possible at launch.
I used to feel that, I guess earlier on in our company's history, like with Lunchbug, I think that we probably learned this, but I used to feel like, we're developing HTML5 games and they can go everywhere, so we should make them go everywhere. Because otherwise, why are we using this technology that's not that great in some regards, And I think that's kind of how we used to feel. And like, I think we got pushed there by the industry, because like our first game, Onslaught Arena, it was just a hardcore desktop game. That's it. Because that's kind of just where we wanted to play. But then we got pushed. Like Lunchbug was very much a product of what the industry was telling us. It was cross-platform. It worked in portrait and landscape. It worked on iPad and Android and desktop, and it was accessible and friendly and cute graphics and like completely inoffensive to anyone in the world, and
but
kind of uninteresting.
All of those
in that regard.
Don't mean anything if the game you have isn't well accepted and monetized correctly and promoted correctly.
Yeah.
We saw it firsthand. We had this, remember that screenshot we had of Lunchbug where it's like running on like, 12 different devices. It's like tablets, several different flavors of phones, Android, my TV, my laptop. Like it's on all these different places, and yet it wasn't monetized very well.
Yeah.
It didn't have like a lot of gameplay to offer the player.
Yep.
Those are the issues with that game, not the fact that it wasn't on every platform in the world.
And it could be argued that that was a waste of time, because it's almost the reverse of how it should be. It's like, hey, there's this game you really like to play, and I'm glad that you like to play it. Did you know that you can now play it in your pocket as well? That kind of a thing. Where you're like, the need needs to like come up organically. Where it's like, man, I've been playing a lot of Lunchbug on my desktop. I really wish I could take it with me on the go. That kind of a thing. Instead of like, hey, there's this subpar gaming experience you could enjoy on any number of devices. It's like, okay.
Now you can have a bad time anywhere.
Yeah, that was a great slogan. I guess Lost Decade Games. Have a bad time anywhere. That's terrible. Worst slogan ever. We've had a number of bad slogans over the years. What was the one prior? It was like do too much. Lost Decade Games, do too much at once.
That's right.
Bite off more than you can chew.
Well, that's kind of in the same vein, right? Like two guys trying to ship a game on HTML5 across, 12 different platforms. Like, come on.
Man, there's so many two-man indie teams, aren't there? Like, I'm bored of hearing about them. That says a lot.
Like, I hate hearing about us. Well, the thing is that, two is a good number because one is tough, but having anyone else, just one more person, I think is beneficial to a lot of people. Obviously there are excellent solo developers, but they work with someone.
Right.
I mean, if you look at most projects, like they collaborated with an artist or they collaborated with a sound guy. The sound was like really meaningful to that specific game or whatever,
Yeah.
So a lot of these games are kind of the product of 2-man, maybe 3-man teams anyway. But beyond that, you start to get a lot bigger. It's easier, I think, as an indie to just have a couple people, a handful maybe working on something because you're agile and focused. I mean, imagine if we had to have game design discussions with even one other person.
Yeah.
It would start to be a cluster really, really quickly.
It would. When you play at these really small numbers, it makes a big difference every time you expand. Like if you're just one person, having to do every single thing can feel really overwhelming. Like not being able to outsource anything. That's rough. Every single thing comes down to you. When you split that, it's like all of a sudden your tasks are only 50%. That's a big step down, It's a big help. And like all of a sudden you can take a vacation. Like I'm just going to disappear for a week. And now this, like, it just shifts the balance a little bit. Now I'm doing 0% and your company can still be moving at 100%, right? Because another person has those reins. But like if you're a one-man team, you go on vacation, you're not pushing forward on anywhere, Your company's engine just stops.
That's true.
And then once you get to 3, I feel like for some reason once you hit 3, like for us to say, for example, let's say we wanted to like hire Joshua Morse, if we could do that. That all of a sudden it feels like you need to be a real company with like reliable income. You know what I mean? Like actual money coming in. Whereas the way we work right now, it's very agile. It's very like we constantly are dipping into our own savings. Like it's pretty much the norm, like a little bit of money will come in and we immediately burn through it and then talk about what to do about that. Yeah. Like
well, it's true. I mean, like the bigger you get, the more there's kind of a responsibility to the larger group,
Yeah, responsibility. It's
very easy for you and I to be aligned on like the various things, like, okay, we're okay with being poor and we're okay with doing this, and we're okay with like throwing out a game design and starting over from scratch. We only have to consider ourselves, but as you start to bring in more people, it becomes harder to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be
not
fun.
That there isn't value in that kind of stuff, obviously, but just the space we're in right now.
Right. someday I think it'd be cool to work with another very small indie team, like maybe a very designer and artist heavy team or something. Someone that would like complement our skills. And like I'm talking about a small game. I'm talking about like a month project or maybe around that ballpark. I'm not talking about, a Wizard's Lizard. It's been in development almost a year, and we only want to keep working on it and all that. It's gonna be a big game by the time we're done with it.
Oh yeah.
I'm talking about like a bite-sized game, like a real simple concept. Pump it out.
Yeah, maybe.
A retreat to the Jeep, if you will.
That's hard though, because like at that point, is it really anything more than just a little game jam? Like, is anything meaningful going to come out of it? Like, I feel like if we're going to take the time to actually collaborate with other people, it should be on something meaningful.
I'm kind of interested in this middle area we haven't really explored much yet. So there's these game jams we do about once a year for indie speedrun and maybe once in a while something else, but it's basically just 2 full days on a game, right?
Right.
And we get a little game out of it. We've had 2 of those. There's been Asylum Night and Retreat to the Jeep. And then we have, like, I guess the closest would be Lunch Bug, which was only like a 3 to 6 month game or something.
It was like 3 months. It was pretty short, relatively speaking.
But I'm kind of interested in, say, like a month-long game. I really want to know, because I don't really have a good concept of it. I want to know what we can make in a month, because I've seen pretty clearly what we can make in 2 days. And I have a kind of a vague idea of what we can make in like a year, although not really. But like I don't. There need like some areas smaller than like a giant game. Like, can we make something of value in a month or 2? I guess that's the question I want to answer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Although I kind of feel like there's a better way to go about it. Like, you shouldn't frame it as, hey, let's take a month and make a game.
Right.
It should kind of start more like, hey, here's a really simple idea for a game. Let's build it in a month.
Yeah.
Like, here's a concise thing that we want to build. Because, I mean, that's kind of our problem right now, right? Like, we start building before we even know what the hell we're building. And I feel like if we just started building for a month, we'd end up with something, like we ended up with like Retreat to the Jeep, Silent Night. They're not terrible games, but they're obviously not, very well thought out games.
Right.
And, having a month to design and implement a game would be a little better. But, we even saw that same, symptom with the Wizard's Lizard, right?
Yeah, definitely. We didn't know what we were building towards.
Right.
Friday, I spent all day getting inked. My tattoo artist improved my Samus and Ultros sections of my arm. And he's kind of a philosophical guy, and he's very obviously he's an artist. So like we like to talk about process and stuff like that. He was talking about starting at the end, and I think that's a really cool idea because like we haven't done that. We always start at the beginning. He's like, okay, we're gonna start working on this game. Okay, you can now walk, and you can now move, and you can now attack, and stuff like that. And we don't know what we're building a lot of the times. And it's been true with the Wizard's Lizard as well. Like we thought a lot about how the game starts. And it's like, well, where does it go? And we're like, I don't know. We save the wizard. Shut up.
Somewhere.
And like it does go somewhere, and like there is an ending there and stuff, but it doesn't have that like, some games when you finish it, you're like, wow, everything really came together at the end, and they tied up all loose ends and yada yada.
Right.
And we don't really do that. And I think that would be a good practice for us.
It would be, yeah. So I guess my point was that I agree with you in theory, but I definitely think that we should have, we should come up with a game that could be built in a month and then build it.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about this before. Like we can move really, really fast sometimes. But the times that we move really, really fast are when we have a pretty good picture in our mind of what we're doing. And like we're great starters, We're like we can move super fast when we're like, oh, let's make a game where you move around and you shoot stuff, and it's like you can just whip through that code super fast.
Yeah.
But then we really start to slow down once we get to the point where we're like, oh, what do we add next? What's happening?
Help me. Yeah. I think that a big part of it in my mind is that like we so rarely get the chance to practice the act of making and shipping a game, Like we've been independent, fully independent now for over 2 years. I guess we founded 3 years ago, but like I don't know. When you're part time and it's kind of moonlighting, like you learn a little bit, but you don't jump into the deep end, you know. But we still had this 2-year period where we're full time and like our time is largely our own, except for having to pay the bills and stuff. But I just like four games we've launched, and that, you know, if you just put that on a grid there, it's like it's basically every 6 months we get practice at having created a game and launching it, and that's our core business basically. We want to create games and launch them, and we get to practice it so rarely, you know. Like it could be advantageous for us to do something like, you know, you see on Twitter, the 1 game a month. Obviously that's a slippery slope. I saw somebody doing, I think it was it Daniel X Moore? Was doing 1 hour game compos. And like, that sounds like fun. That sounds like a really great way to spend an hour, but I don't know that you get the practice when you're doing that I want, you know, because what I want is the stuff. Like I can make a little game where you can move around and like, maybe there's some mechanics there you haven't seen before, like something kind of interesting could come out of it. But to me, that's the easy, fun part. The hard part is like getting a player engaged, making a player care, first of all, keeping a player through the game, you know, and like wrapping it all up and distributing it and all the infrastructure stuff.
Where the paper prototyping might help us a lot, or just like, you know, drawing it out, because I feel like in some sense we shouldn't be coupling the code with the design so much. You know, we tend to think, especially like in game jam terms, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to make a little shooter. But a shooter is really just like, it's like a mechanic, right? It's a way to move through and interact with the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that I've been trying to set my head more in a different direction where it's like, what's the game? Like, what's, like, we usually call it the meta game, right? Like, what are you playing? What are you trying to do overall?
Yeah.
And then using the mechanics as a way to kind of drive that.
Right.
Anyways, it's hard. Game design's hard.
It's really hard. And the whole time, like, it feels like it's really hard just to find an idea and focus on it, because you keep having to like let's say you start to work on a game, and this happens a lot. Okay, is you come up with the concept, and then you find out that it's already been done, almost like exactly, you know, like people have ideas like that all the time. Where you're like, hey, what about a real-time messaging service where you can message anyone in the world, and you're limited to 140 characters, and it works on mobile and in your browser, and it's like somebody did that. It's called Twitter. You're like, oh crap, like that kind of thing happens all the time, you know. An open source repository, like social coding. It's like you just described GitHub, or like a. You know, someone describes Tetris. Like that happens a lot, and that's tough. Like you need to have like a knowledge of what else is out there, but not let it affect your work. That's hard.
Oh, it's really hard, yeah. Well, you know, we always talk about the line between cloning and not, and remixing, and you know how you want to make games that are more original or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really tough. I mean, at some point, there has to be some originality, or you wouldn't ever get new games.
Right.
But a lot of the time, it's just remixing things that you've seen in other, you know, instances.
Yeah. I worry sometimes that we're not being original enough, that we're being too derivative. And like, this is probably evidenced by the fact that like every other time I see a tweet about Wizard's Lizard, it's like, check out a Wizard's Lizard inspired by Binding of Isaac. And I'm like, it's just not true. It wouldn't bother me if it was true.
Yeah, it might as well be true.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes.
Right.
So, we saw recently in the news Unity 5. I guess this was just in time for GDC week. Unity 5 was announced, all kinds of sexy new stuff, and kind of went in tandem with the news that, I mean, everybody saw this coming, I think. Unity and Mozilla worked together so that you can take your Unity project and you can output it to HTML5 renderer. It uses WebGL so I think we all saw that. I saw that coming, but it's cool to see that. I wonder how the 3D game engines out there feel about it.
It's interesting. I think there's a couple things going on that I find interesting. One is that I think that, obviously, I think I mentioned this in the roundtable, but I think that Unity's decision to support WebGL is a big kind of nod to how prevalent HTML5 has become for gaming.
Yeah.
Like, it's a thing that people want. It's a desirable place to be. People don't want plugins. Like, it kind of validates the fact that, like, hey, people want games that they can play in their browser without having to install your crap.
Totally.
Which I think is cool. Especially since, there are platforms like Apple where it's not even possible. However, that being said, it's not like WebGL would run on all of the Apple devices anyway, so it's not quite there yet, but it's definitely trending in that direction.
I hope that this completely eliminates the need for the Unity plugin, the browser plugin, because that, to me, from the very beginning, it's just been so obnoxious to click on a link and just see this Unity plugin required. I'm like, I first saw that like a year ago or something, and I was like, haven't we moved past that? Because like even the dominant plugin in the world, like Flash, that's like has like 97% penetration. I mean,
right.
That's the last number I remember, but that was probably desktop only. I'm sure if you look at like all browsing data, including iOS where Flash just doesn't exist, it's probably shockingly lower. I don't know.
And then Unity on top of that has got to be ridiculously low.
I bet Unity is like 3% or less penetration. So it's just like the overwhelming majority of people don't have it. So it's like, just don't even bother with that. That's how I felt from the very beginning. I was like, ugh,
right.
Plugin. Get out of here. Like the browser is so capable, We don't need a stupid plugin.
Well, yes and no. I mean, now, in like the past year, WebGL probably, but beyond that, it was pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of browsers didn't even come with WebGL enabled by default a year ago.
Right.
And so, no, you couldn't just click on anything and play 3D graphics in your browser.
Yeah, no. I don't know. I guess being a HTML5 developer myself, I've always seen it from the very beginning. I just kind of felt like that was, it's like a Band-Aid. I knew it was a temporary stopgap, so I never wanted to take it seriously,
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, I've never installed Unity because, for that very reason.
Yeah.
Also because, like, it's such a subset of content. If it was, like, as ubiquitous as Flash was in the day where basically you were missing out on a large portion of the internet if you didn't have Flash installed, that's not really the case for Unity,
No, definitely not.
Like, every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I can play this game in the web browser. I may click, oh, Unity, never mind. I don't care that much.
Right.
Right.
Do you care this much? No. Goodbye. No. That's the most people, that's how they feel.
Yeah. So anyways, it's a good thing for Unity. It's a good thing for the web. I'm also really interested to see how this kind of affects the other 3D game engine middleware people, It's interesting. I feel like Unity has kind of commoditized that. It kind of used to be where it was like, oh, like you have to pay several $1,000s a year for a Unreal license. I mean, I don't even know what the price is, but I'm guessing it kind of seemed like it was something for bigger, more serious studios, right?
Right.
Like, oh, you're a 20-person studio and you've got AAA experience, so you license Unity and you build your game on that. And then kind of Unity comes along and it's like, hey, 3D game ID for everyone. You're one person, you're two person, you're 50 people, And I think that you're seeing the response to that. Specifically at GDC, I think Unreal announced some like, $9.95 or $14.95 a month or, some kind of like very indie casual friendly licensing model.
Right. Yeah, I bet Unreal is seeing a lot of pressure from Unity to be more indie friendly, to be more accessible, to do stuff like look closer at the browser.
Unity has a big head start on everybody in that sense, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I think especially within the indie scene and even the not so indie scene, I think a lot of people are starting to use Unity.
Definitely.
Which is interesting. Oh, the other thing I got at GDC,
What's that?
Nerd Plague.
Yeah, you're starting to sound a little bit horsey. I wonder if we're gonna have full on horse Blair by next week.
I'm like full Blair at the moment.
I'm always shocked when I come away from a nerd conference without Nerd Plague. I think it's
thought
because
I got away clean, man. Because it was like I was fine until Monday. At Monday morning I woke up and I was like, I have a little tickle in my throat. That's not good.
I hate that tickle. We were like, no, I know what that feeling is.
And then this morning I was like, oh, it's worse. Damn it. So I'm guessing by tomorrow it'll be like full blown.
I'm really paranoid at a conference. Just like because I know that I'll be shaking hands with my right hand, I keep my left hand immaculate as I can. And like, you just scratch your face and you rub your eyes and you maybe you bite your nails or whatever the case, right? Just don't do that with the hand that you've been like touching everything and shaking hands and like walk up to your buddy and rub his head and like, it's humans are filthy.
I know. I even tried to be careful. I brought like hand sanitizer with me and I used it like, before I ate and things like that. And like, I don't even know.
Who knows? Yeah. It could be all those nerds you were making out with.
I know. I shouldn't have done that.
It could be those toilet seats you were licking for no reason. That was a bad idea, Jeff. Gross.
Yeah, it was pretty gross. Anyways, GDC was a lot of fun. It was good to see you in person. It was kind of funny actually. A lot of people kind of asked us. They're like, "Oh, like you guys work remotely. Like how is that?" I think our response was kind of generally just like, "That's fine."
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, we're both pretty accessible. We both are on Google Hangouts. Like we chat all the time. Like there's probably some fidelity lost and some like, ability to be spontaneous and like just jump into a room and start whiteboarding. Like maybe you lose something there.
I can't punch you in the shoulder when I get excited about ideas.
No complaints here. You are a violent man.
I try.
Your violence is like on this same graph as your caffeine amount.
Yeah, it's true.
That you've had. Those 2 bars of yours fill up.
They're definitely correlated.
Rate. Yes.
But yeah, a lot of times when I talk to people about it, though, I often have to preface it with the fact that we worked very closely in person for a long time.
We definitely had a rapport, like even from the very beginning. We just kind of were on the same page. So like, it's almost like a zipper that you're zipping up, and like it starts on the same thread. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there was very little like maneuvering that had to be done to where we're like, bam, totally in sync. And then we worked together at Raptor for a year, working on web stuff, and then at Game Closer for almost a year, working on game stuff. So we had like 2 solid years before we even started working on Lost Decade. And then Lost Decade, we had like we'd get together once or twice a week, and like we had all that time. So like there's a long history there of just us working together in various different capacities, either like in person a lot or not.
Well, it's a very slow transition, right? Like we went from, we see each other every single day at Raptor and Game Closure.
Right.
To then like, we see each other twice a week for a full day.
Right. Like at Lost Decade.
When we started Lost Decade, yeah.
And then
it went to like once a week for a full day.
Yeah. We started.
It was like once every 2 weeks.
We started moving farther and farther apart from each other. I don't know what that implies, but you're like, "Hey, I'll be in El Cerrito." I'm like, "Okay, now we're an hour away." I'm like, "Hey, I moved to LA." Okay, now we're 6 hours away. Like, next it'd be like, "I'm gonna be in Hawaii." Like, now we're a 7-hour flight away.
3 time zones and
yeah. Right. And that might go great. Who knows?
Yeah, it's been interesting actually. I think because of the fact that we worked so closely beforehand and the fact that the transition was really gradual made it pretty easy.
Yeah.
To just kind of slide into the, I just never actually see you in person.
Yeah, very seldomly. But it's still like when we saw each other last week, it was still just like, oh, hey, there you are. It wasn't like, hey, man, it's been so long. How the hell are you? It was just, yeah, I know. I see when you get a haircut. Like, I'm one of the first people to know.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. Like, I saw you in person. I was like, oh, I haven't actually seen you in person in a while. This should feel different, but it's not.
I guess the only way is like we see each other from the covered nipples up. Like, I mean, not to say that our nipples are visible because we're wearing shirts and stuff, but like, that's about where the camera is, you know?
Right.
So it's like, wow, I haven't seen your legs. You got nice legs. Good job. Good job
thanks,
on your
Matt.
legs.
Good job on your legs.
That's funny. I feel like sometimes it's easy to look at a situation and be like, that looks easy. I'm just going to do it. You know, like someone looks at us remote working and they're like, I'm just going to remote work with this person I've never met before or something, you know?
Right.
And that's true for lots of different things. You see somebody playing basketball and they're amazing at it. And you're like, I'm just going to go play basketball and be amazing at it. But it's like these things take time, you know? And like with our remote working, like it's not easy just because it's easy. It's easy because we've been like moving towards that for 3 years.
Well, that's why, like, whenever someone asks that question of me, I always feel like I have to tell that story I just told because,
Yeah.
you know, without the proper context, you might think that, like, you know, oh, it's like you can just, like, you know, work 6 hours apart from someone and it's totally fine.
Someone's like, hey, so you remote work full time, been doing that for years. How's that going? And you go, it's the best ever. Do it right now. Peace out. And you just walk away.
Right.
You leave them to their own accords.
Demise.
You drop the mic.
That's right. So, to change the subject, I've been playing a couple indie games recently
Like what?
that I really like. One is called Banished.
Banished.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think that you would like it, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
Anyways, it's like a medieval fantasy Sim City.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. But it's kind of like it's more, I would say it's more zoomed in. I mean, you're still dealing with like houses and stuff, but it's like it keeps track of each individual person. And so like each person has a job and like it's a little more granular than SimCity, but it's also kind of on the same scale where you're trying to like start from this very small, like you start with like 5 families and you've got to grow into like a large city and there's, you know, different kinds of buildings you can make and different kinds of jobs people can have. But it's pretty intricate and I've been having a lot of fun with it.
Does it make you want to make a sim game?
Unfortunately, yeah, it does.
I really
Not
badly...
so much like SimCity, but I do want to explore some of those concepts we talked about before where it's like some kind of 4X-y cellular autonoma kind of something.
Involving growth and...
Right.
I talk about ActRaiser sometimes on the podcast, I'm sure, and I really love in that game how like you can build your little town, and there's these little people that run around, and they're just so cute, and like there's a little dog. The dog is made up of like he has like 9 pixels to his person, you know, and he's just a little puppy walking around, and it's so cool just seeing these little things, you know, and I want to make a game where you can like. I don't know. I do want to zoom in a little bit more, you know, because like an ActRaiser, you can't say like, "Hey, I want this person, to go into the forest or something."
Yeah,
but then again, like I don't want to do it like World of Warcraft, where you zoom in and I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend 80 hours with this character. I want it to be a little zoomed out, but not. Anyway,
Banished feels like a really good balance, I think, because you don't issue commands directly to each person. You kind of have these controls where you can say, oh, I built. Say a fishing dock, and now I want 4 of my people to be fishermen,
right?
Or 1 or 2 or 3, and so you can kind of allocate people that way. Anyways, it's a lot of fun.
How did you? This is an indie game.
Yeah.
How did you find it?
I don't remember.
Trick question. Were you on Steam?
I heard about it somewhere. I heard about it on YouTube or something. I think Northern Lion played it. And then I saw it was on my brother's wish list, and I was like, oh, I should check this out.
So it was non-traditional media. That would be Total Biscuit, who is just a independent entrepreneurial broadcaster. Non-traditional. No, it's the same guy, isn't it?
No.
Which one also goes by Cynical Brit?
I think that's Total Biscuit.
Okay. I knew that one of them had 2 names, and I guess I got those mixed up. Anyway, there's at least 2 awesome YouTubers out there.
At least 2.
We should
maybe more. We don't
better.
know.
Especially if we want to woo them in to play our games, right? I should become a fan. Where's I going with that? Oh yeah, so you heard it set up there, right? Initially,
Right.
like sprung to mind, and if it wasn't for that initial like notification of it, basically, when you saw it in your brother's wish list, you might not have thought anything of it, you know?
I might not have.
So I think it was like that initial exposure through non-traditional broadcasting, followed up by strong recommendation from someone close to your circles who you trust.
Yep.
Very interesting.
Steam's pretty good about that, actually, because I went to visit the Banished store page on Steam, and it told me right away. They're like, oh, your brother has this in his wish list. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Well, now.
Huh.
That's interesting. Was it? No, it was yesterday, I think. Or maybe it was today. Yeah, maybe it was today. Anyway, Scapegoat 2 came out. We know Ian. We met him first at Casual Connect, and then the Bay Area Indies, or Bindies as they like to be called. You have attended a bunch of different gatherings that they've had. We know Ian and Randy who worked on that project, and we wish them well. I picked up a copy.
Yeah, me too. I've actually played a bunch already. I'm pretty far.
Wow. I haven't yet, but I will this week. I'm looking forward to it.
That was the other game I was going to talk about when I said I was playing a couple indie games. It was a Scapegoat 2.
How's it
I
going?
really liked the first one, and I really liked the second one. Plus, I'm like kind of sick, so kind of just like sitting back and just mindlessly. I guess not mindlessly because it's like a puzzle game, but
Right.
just basically playing some games has felt good because I wasn't feeling great the past couple of days.
Totally. So yeah, go pick that up. Support an indie. I'm sure they're doing just fine because they also got published by Double Fine.
Oh yeah. Did you see that video?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like high
That's
quality.
pretty funny.
It's funny.
With
It's
Tim
got
Schafer.
Tim
It's
Schafer.
hilarious.
He's basically like the celebrity of indies, Tim Schafer.
Yeah. That's true.
So yeah, I'm sure they're doing great.
Are you playing anything else?
I just recently put down Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze because it's just irritatingly hard, and for whatever reason, the challenge is not like.
I remember you were talking about that at GDC.
Yeah.
How on one hand, Spelunky. Oh my God, I mentioned it. But
Dang it.
it's frustratingly hard, but you love it. And Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is frustratingly hard, and you're just like, damn it.
I'm so fascinated by that because like all the ingredients are there. I mean, I love Donkey Kong Country. I beat it every which way, but then again, Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 had no interest to me. I don't know what it was. But Tropical Freeze has all the right ingredients. It's a new Nintendo game. It's like, I don't know. I think a big part of it is that the controls just feel stupid sloppy to me. It's ridiculous. Like your donkey, your giant donkey man is like in the practically the middle of the screen. Nintendo likes to give you these giant buffers between the edges, and I'll be running to the right, and like when you do a roll and jump in Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, I measured it one time. You launch yourself an entire screen's length. You can't even see where you're going to land. It's
Really?
it just
Sounds
feels like
kinda
a
funky.
sloppy, like for whatever reason, it just doesn't connect with me, And I feel similarly about the recent Mario games because there's just too much crazy crap happening with the physics. There's all this complication, like, well, the moment you start running, there's like this half a second period where you're running really stupid slowly. I like stuff to be on a dime. If I'm holding the run button, I want to be running. I don't want to be like ramp it up,
Yeah, you don't like loosey-goosey kind of
I
controls.
don't like loosey-goosey controls. I like exact controls. That might be a big part of it. But also, like, I don't know. They've got these brilliant boss designs. I hope I didn't talk about this in the podcast already. They've got like multiple patterns, and like every time they repeat the pattern, they add a new element, and they're really great designs, and just so much polish. But for whatever reason, it just feels too hard to me, and I'm really fascinated by why it hasn't pulled me in. It's disappointing. But I don't
I'm
know
really
if it's like
interested to see what your opinion of Scapegoat 2 controls are.
it's not exactly like the first one.
But similar, I guess.
Well, I will probably play it today. I can't wait.
You liked the controls in the first one?
I loved the first one. I know the second one, from my understanding, it's exactly the same, except it's got brand new graphics, brand new music, brand new puzzles, and I loved all three of those elements of the first one. So I'm like I kind of
forgot how the controls felt because it's been a long time since I played it. But yeah, they're pretty exact, I thought.
Nice. Yeah, I really crave that in a game. I don't know. I don't like managing this like. It feels like miscommunication almost, you know? Like I'm trying to tell the game, like in Mario Brothers, all the time I miss these jumps, and I'm like, look, I'm really good at this, okay? In other games, I just feel like however they did it, for whatever reason, it just doesn't jive with the way I want to play. I don't know. Could just be that I'm bad at those games.
That's a strong possibility. Anyways, I think that's about all I have. We are finishing up our contract game this week, hopefully, and then I'm back to Steam integration for Wizard's Lizard and other lizardy things.
Woo! I can't wait to get back into Wizard's Lizard. It is my goal to work on it until I'm out of money. And then, like, the hope is that by working on it, like, more money will come, but we'll see.
And then we'll beg on the street for more money to continue working on it.
Alms for the poor, please.
Yeah, I had this idea the other day. I was thinking about, like, you know, what if our next game is just a Wizard's Lizard 2?
We've had that thought before. Yeah.
Like, thematically. It doesn't even have to be like a 3/4 overhead Zelda-style game.
It could be side-scrolling platformer again. It could be that's how Zelda did it, and look where Zelda is now. It's one of the biggest, most beloved franchises in the world, and it's exactly how they started.
That will be a recipe for success for us, too.
Yeah.
Clearly, if you go 3/4 overhead, side-scrolling platformer, 3/4 overhead, you win.
That is the recipe for success.
Yes. But anyways, I was thinking, you know, there's been some activity on the forums recently, and there's this guy, Mew. I think it's a guy. Maybe I shouldn't say it's a guy. Anyways, there's a person who goes by Mew who's done some really great fan-related stuff on the forums, and it's really cool to see the comics that are created. And I was kind of just thinking about that whole, you know, scenario last night, and it's like, it's not something that would have happened with a different character, you know, like it wouldn't have happened with our original character, and it probably wouldn't have even happened with the first iteration of Raga.
No, it definitely wouldn't have. It's like because we spent so much time on the character. Like, we deliberately were like, okay, we need to have a better character, so let's give this character some love. And we spent time on elements like, okay, we want the lizard to be tied to the lizard somehow, wizard somehow. So we gave him the purple collar to like signify the like belonging and stuff.
Right.
But we put a lot of thought and time into it.
So for some reason I had this picture of you playing Raga in a side-scrolling platformer, and you have like a Yoshi kind of tongue.
Oh.
Where you can like grab things with your tongue.
Oh, what fun. Yeah. Oh man, that's a great idea. Ship it.
Let's go make that game right now.
Coming from LDG in 2015. A Wizard's Lizard 2.
Wizard's Lizard 2 side-scrolling platformer edition. Hyper Turbo Remix.
Ship it.
Anyways, I think that the lizard character is probably one of the bigger draws to the game right now, and it might be something we should capitalize on for future anything.
Definitely agree. Cool. I think that's all we got. Thanks for listening. Go by Scapegoat2. Follow us on Twitter. I've started to put some Lostcast videos on YouTube, so go subscribe on YouTube. Be much appreciated. And we'll talk at you again in a week.
Ship it.